It seemed like the forts were about to fall, thousands of Crusaders attacking. Just then, the Hussites crest the ridge with loud cries, loud battle hymns. So we're right now on Vitkov Hill, which is this hill that overlooks the city of Prague. So I'm going to talk about an important battle that was fought here during the Hussite Wars. Sigismund, the Holy Roman Emperor, is on a crusade against the Hussites that he had induced the Pope to call. He had an army 80,000 strong, perhaps up to 150,000, one of the largest of the period. The exact numbers are not entirely clear. From 33 nations, from Spain to Russia, gathered to defeat the Hussites. Croatians, Dalmatians, Poles, English, French, Dutch, Germans, including a lot of religious clergy up to archbishops. So they were crusaders fighting for forgiveness of their sins that the Pope had promised them, and also for plunder. Any Czech who was captured would be burnt alive, even if they weren't a Hussite. Sigismund probably had a 4 or 5 to 1 superiority over the Hussites. Sigismund begins his campaign with political machinations. Negotiations with the regent that had turned to the Hussites. He gets him to turn back to his side, surrender Prague castle, get him to open its gates, and 4,000 Germans come in. Prague is one of the hubs of the Hussites, who are all over Bohemia. The Hussites try to capture the castle, but their assault is poorly organized and is beaten back with heavy casualties. The Hussites were in desperate straits. There's 2 fortresses in Prague, the castle and another one further down. You can see it on the map. Both of those were held by Sigismund's troops. So the envoys met with Sigismund. They humbly knelt before him, envoys from the Hussites, implores forgiveness, and they even offered to tear down some of the city walls. Their demand was that they receive communion in 2 kinds. But Sigismund refused to grant any concessions to the Hussites. He required that all the fortifications be torn down, all the weaponry be given up, and he's not going to offer any promises that they could continue to worship as Hussites. So the citizens of Prague reject this and work on strengthening their fortifications. There's 2 main sects of Hussites, in addition to other smaller ones. The Taborites, which Jan Zizka was commanding the military forces of. They were closer to Reformed Christians. There's also the Urquharites. There's more of those here in Prague, and they were closer to Catholics with just a few Reformed elements. Prague was in trouble, so they turned to the Taborites. Zizka marched his troops quickly. 9,000 men, fast, trained soldiers, are able to arrive here in time on May 20th. There is some issues between them. Some of the Taborites, led especially by the Hussite women actually, they would sometimes go into some churches, destroy some of the icons, which they said were idolatrous. But they are able to preserve peace, to unite against Sigismund. Zizka also tries and lays siege to Prague castle. Sigismund advances closer to try to relieve this castle. Zizka offers battle. Sigismund doesn't accept it under the terms that he's giving. He falls back. So they focus eventually not on the siege, but on defending Prague against the Crusader army. Vitkov Hill was very important to the Hussites' defense of Prague, because there were a lot of the roads were controlled by Sigismund, but this controlled one of the roads that led out so supplies could come into Prague. So at this point, the city was much smaller. A lot of these houses would not have been here at the time of the battle. It was more confined to the town and to its walls. There was a field on this side of the hill that was open all the way to the river called Hospital Field, named after a hospital that was built by the Knights of the Cross with the Red Star. So Vitkov was important because if this hill fell, supplies could not be brought into the city and the city would starve. There was an old watchtower on the crest. Zizka improved the area with 2 small wood and earth forts, probably with some small cannon and also with a moat. These didn't hold much men, probably 30 men each. but the fort could hopefully hold out long enough for reinforcements from the city to arrive. The Crusaders planned a three-prong attack. The first part would be to capture Vitkov Hill, then they would issue from both their fortifications defending Prague that they still held. But first they needed to capture Vitkov Hill. So thousands of Crusader cavalry crossed the river, upriver from here, and climbed Vitkov Hill, moved down this way towards where we're standing. They crossed the moat, captured the watchtower, and began assaulting the walls. These are cavalry, these are knights, fighting against a very small number. 60 against thousands. The wall itself was only lightly held, only 26 men, including a woman and a girl that were there. And the women actually led the countercharge. These people have no guns, so they're using stones and spears. But the woman leads the charge with the cry, "No Christian must ever retreat from Antichrist." She was killed in the defense. The ridge was a good position because it was very narrow. It drops off steeply to each side. You can imagine if you have two small forts and a wall, there's not a lot the cavalry especially can do. They're not going to be able to move around the sides here. Zizka saw what was happening, and he saw that these forts would fall even with their good position. So he sends out reinforcements from the town, followed by the elite bodyguard led by Zizka himself. They march up around and up this side of the ridge. It seemed like the forts were about to fall, thousands of Crusaders attacking. Just then, the Hussites crest the ridge with loud cries, loud battle hymns, a priest at the front holding the elements of communion, archers at front, followed by peasants armed with flails and pikes. The royalists were very surprised. The ridge was so steep, they had not seen the Hussites until they arrived directly on them. The cavalry falls back. In the confusion, they end up riding right off the edge. There is a 250 feet drop there. So horses are just jumping off, rolling down the hill with the knights heavily armored on top of them. Horses are spooking. A lot of them are falling 15, 30 feet, even more. The casualties are very heavy. Many broken bones. The Hussites then, they're on foot. They're able to move easier, climb down the hill, begin killing the cavalry. Any of the Crusaders who survived begin running down, riding across the hill, try to cross the river there. Many drowned. 300 horsemen died, another 200 were wounded, including Count Henry of Eisenberg, who was the general. He was one of those killed. So the Hussites gather on the field, sing hymns of praise for their victory. And the hill was renamed Vitkov Hill after Jan Zizka. The crusading army does not attack again. Even though just a tiny part of their entire force was engaged in this battle, Sigismund does not want to storm the city. He was hoping that it would surrender when it saw the large army. They make this attack. They're completely destroyed without really putting up much of a fight at all. A lot of the Crusaders want to proceed. They set up siege guns to begin a bombardment. Sigismund stops them. He wanted the heretics killed, the Hussites as he saw as heretics, but this was a very nice city. It was one of the crown jewels of his empire. He doesn't want to destroy it. So if they're not going to surrender, he's not going to put the city through a siege. So eventually, more of the Hussites meet with Sigismund, and they arrange a deal. The Bohemian nobles promised to crown Sigismund king if he would send the mercenaries home. Eventually, he agrees to these conditions. The Hussites are going to continue to be allowed to worship, according to this deal, I believe. Sigismund strips all the riches from Prague Castle that were in it at that time, uses them to pay for his army, sends them home. Since they couldn't get the booty from the town, Sigismund is basically having to strip his own wealth to give to them. But there's a problem with this deal, because it was the Bohemian nobles who made it, not the Hussites. Even though some of the nobles were Hussite, they didn't have authority to give the town over. So they made the deal, and Sigismund sent his army away and then realizes, I don't even have the city that I wanted. Sigismund ends up being humiliated. God delivered the Hussites, gave them a respite from war, though the wars and crusades would continue for many years against Sigismund and others. But instead, Zizka is able to go out, capture a lot of Catholic towns that were still held by the emperor. couple quick thoughts what we can learn from this battle. First, the battle is not to the strong. The powerful crusade, tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000, 200,000. By men's wisdom, they should have triumphed, but they were defeated in their first attempt and never tried again. God frustrated their counsels and their courage. Second, God uses weak and faithless men. The regent, who was Hussite but changed sides back and forth, he helped bring the Hussites together through his leadership. He kind of built the Hussite movement, even though he seems not really to have actually held to it.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share it with your friends. You can also visit www.discerninghistory.com for more videos and other resources.